welcome today, Doctor. Are you able to see that there?
Yes, it's visible. And also
Yes.
check the sound microphone with the Dr. Slade.
Are you able to hear Dr. Slade?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, welcome. Happy International Women's Day to you. I'm Kalpana and I will be hosting today's event with you. And before we begin, I would like to introduce to Anna that she's our main speaker, Dr. Lanier. Am I saying correctly? Please correct me.
It's Lanier.
Lanier, okay. Dr. Lanier, she is a nationally recognized advisor, speaker, author, and a future of work strategist, specialist in workforce resilience, inclusive culture, and the economics and the racial equity. She is a CEO of the Harper's Led, a Louisville-based WBENSC certified advisory firm with an international presence. She's bringing over 25 years of experience across the banking, labor, employment law, collective bargaining, human resource, and the state government. She's a former senior vice president with the Federal Reserve, combining a legal expertise and organizational leader and the macroeconomics insight to address the modern work's challenges. She holds a credential as a labor and the employment attorney and 3-time chief human resource officer. She named one of the 100 women to know in America 2024 by the J.P. Morgan Chase for leadership in a global racial equity and community advancement. She's a founder of the AARE Women Collective 2023, a racial equity coaching initiative empowering white women to advance the equity as a partner, leader, and advocate. Now a global movement and the over 100,000 participants. She advocates that the demographic shift towards a majority Black and Brown working age population by 2045 represents an economic imperative, not merely a social one. She's recognized as a grace center, forward-thinking leader guiding organization to thrive in a multicultural force future. What amazing introduction that is. And she would like to talk about the Build by the Women, Empower and Influence and the Equity Era. So go ahead, Dr. Lanier. I would like to please reflect yourself here. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction and for allowing me the opportunity to take space with you in this beautiful community on this beautiful Sunday. I thought maybe I'd spend a few minutes talking about the work that I do in general and the circumstances giving rise to it, and then perhaps just kind of round out the latter part of the talk, focusing on what I see as the unique role that women can and should play in helping to advance equity across certainly the United States and the world. So as was shared, my name is Nikki Lanier, and I am based in Louisville, Kentucky. I came to this work after having practiced law for several years and human resources for even longer. And during my HR days, I learned so much about the implications of work and what the workplace does to us and what it expects from us and what we get back in return beyond pay, beyond benefits. I just really became a student of how work actually works, particularly for those of us who are of color, people who are different than white, male, able-bodied, heterosexual, recognizing that in this country, certainly, and in the world, there just is an assigned narrative oftentimes to people who are not that prototype, that white male prototype. There's a assigned narrative of some sort of deficiency that we end up kind of quietly spending the rest of our lives in defense of. And so I became a student of that in the context of work and how workplaces either understood and shifted and honored and respected the very different navigation that employees kind of get fall into, versus those employers that don't. And so then I spent some time working for the Federal Reserve, which is our central bank, and I didn't do law or HR. I did macroeconomics and monetary policy, and just really got a chance to study with some of our nation's most formidable economists how much hate costs the United States. What is the cost of inequity and the societal implications associated with the way we have conditioned ourselves to treat others in ways that hamper the economic mobility of the others. And so I became really steeped in that work. And then I started my firm, Harper Slade, which is named in honor of my grandmothers. It's their maiden names, my paternal and maternal grandmothers. And our work focuses on how to advance equity as a macroeconomic imperative. So it's not DEI per se, although we do focus on how companies, organizations, employers can reimagine both their workplace culture and their workplace systems to ensure both are hospitable for the inevitable transition into a multicultural society. And so my premise or my hypothesis is it is uncognizable, it is irresponsible and unsustainable for a country to run itself well when the majority of its citizens, and we know that Black and brown people are becoming a part of the majority, becoming the majority. So it's impossible for a country to maintain its own solvency and relevance and economic footing and G7 footing and geopolitical footing and fiscal infrastructure. You can't maintain a society where the majority of its citizens just can't participate well in the economy, in the social systems, and the political structures of that country because of isms, racism, sexism. It's just it becomes a threat to that entire society, not just the people most closely impacted. So that's what we focus on in my company. And because I tend to really fret about what must be true in our society over the next 19 years, so by 2045, we will be a majority minority nation by way of the adults who are available to run the country. So we have 19 years to fix and to repair, to remediate, or perhaps even just soften the venomous sting of racism. And so I know that that is a very heavy lift, that our country has really only ever known racism and societal bias based on what people look like. We've only known that. That is just a threat. That ideology, that mindset, that belief system is the number one threat, in my opinion, to our overall well-being. That can't just be tackled in the workplace. We really need to be thinking about outside of work in our day-to-day lives. How can we manifest a very different reality, a very different cultural reset, behavior and belief system reset on the value of people who look like you and me between now and the next 19 years. And so that's another reason why I focus not just on the workplace, but also with women, because I believe that women have a very unique role, very unique opportunity, and arguably a very unique responsibility to help shape what the country must be in order to accommodate this very important, unprecedented shifting in the majority minority reality. And so, as was shared in the bio, I started a organization called the Rare Woman Collective, RAARE, and RARE stands for Radical Action, Advancing Racial Equity. And it is a program suite primarily for white women to teach them how to advocate for racial equity in the spaces that they are in. So not necessarily marching in the streets or going to Washington, but just how, as a mother, as a daughter, as a sister, as a friend, as a community member, can they use every engagement that they get proximity to with other white people? How can they use that as an opportunity to advocate for the world that must be, instead of focusing on the world that is, uniquely as white women? And so that's what we do. We've got 3,000 women in that group. We have 5 countries represented, and these women are all assented to and focused on getting coaching and support and community to help them be bold and courageous and still grace-centered, because we think it's important to not be mean with this work and not be harmful and reckless with our language and disrespectful to our family members. There's definitely a way to advocate with grace and with patience and with love, and not anger, even though it does make us angry sometimes. You don't lead with that anger. So we teach them all the modality around that. We teach them the attributes that must be true of advocates. We teach them the science behind advocacy. We teach them about the definitions that we use and the goals of each and every engagement. So every single engagement that you have really should have a goal around softening a heart related to people who are different. So that's what we've been focusing on. So I run this company, Harper Slade, and that's more focused on businesses, companies, and organizations. And then we have this whole other body of work called the Rare Woman Collective that is exclusively for white women, to teach them how to advance, racial equity in the spaces that they're already in. And then in general, what we're spending some time in this month, and I don't know if any of you might find yourself in the San Francisco or Bay Area, but I will be speaking there, hosting an event there at the end of this month, really focused on women in general and how we women can really think differently about the roles that we play, our positions as moms, wives, daughters, sisters, aunts, our power as natural influencers in our homes oftentimes and in our communities, and the positions and the proximity that we have to other people to help bring about another kind of awakening, a gentle introduction of new ways to believe, value assignments for people who look like us. I think that is in general women's work, especially at this point in our nation's either evolution or devolution, depending on how you see it. But we are very much at a crossroads and at a place where we have to decide as a society what we stand for. And I think we have some pretty glaring examples coming out of Washington of what we really do not ever need to stand for. We should not ever stand for. But what's the alternative, and what are we willing to invest in and commit to really live out an alternative? Because I would argue that where we are today, societally and politically, and with our president and his belief system, is just, it really is the pinnacle. It is the continued maturity of racism and sexism and isolationism and elitism. It is the height of that. It is what has happened over the last hundreds of years and kind of come to a head. And in some ways, it's a blessing, because I think we needed to see that and we needed to experience it. As awful as some of this is, it's necessary for growth. But the question is, growing into what? So I think I don't know that we could get much, I'm sure we could, but we can't get much worse. So we have to present another alternative. And I think that will be women who will be ushering that in, and not as an indictment to men, and not as not bemoaning the role and the importance of men in our lives and men in our countries. I think it's just a different lens. It's a different lived experience. It's a different perspective that comes through the feminine arc. That tends to be far more, from a default standpoint, compassionate, far more focused on the moral and kind of consciousness curation of our children and even our spouses and our families and our community. We are more oriented, I think divinely so, to really take inventory of how people ought to be behaving with one another and how to plant seeds of belief systems that are broad and wide and not narrow and isolating. And so I think if we collectively ignite that, again, not as an indictment of men, not as a protest against a political party or a protest against a certain race, but it's more around really activating what is our own potency that I believe has been underutilized. And so that's why I think about what is the unique role of women in an era where equity is desperately needed. So let me pause here and tell you how I define equity. I define equity as proportional fairness that takes into consideration what has uniquely and only happened to a certain group of people, in this case, people of color, and works to remedy the same. So equity is three real things that are hard sometimes to wrap around, especially in our country, in the United States. So it is proportionally fair, which is not fair. It's proportionally fair. So it's not about equality. It's not about same. Everybody gets the same. It really forces us to believe and think about what is appropriate given the lived experiences and the realities of someone else's navigation in order to buoy them into a more livable and more appropriately functioning state of being societally, right? So proportional fairness is not fair, but it does account for and must know about and take consideration for what has uniquely and only happened to people of color in this country. And in order to know that, you have to become a student of that. And at this point, you have to seek that out because we've had years of erosion of really sound and just and broad and accurate teachings about the lived experience of people of color in our country. In fact, we have a president and a regime that has rendered, in some respects, the knowing of and the teaching of Black and Brown history as illegal. And certain books now just cannot be read or cannot be purchased or certainly can't be consumed by our children in their elementary school lives. And so the full teaching of exactly what has happened to Black and Brown people in this country has to be sought after hungrily. And that's another reason, side note, why I talk to women, and especially white women, about how they raise their children. And I have books. I have a book that's available to women to help them introduce their children at young ages to experiences that broaden their minds and their mindsets around multiculturalism and make it less daunting. Introduce their children to the idea of Black and Brown intellectualism, healthy Black and Brown families, the beauty of Black and Brown culture. All of those things need to be, in my opinion, introduced to young white children very early in their life so that it doesn't become something that they get, a narrative that they get sucked into around the stereotypes of us, because their parents have been intentional in introducing them into the realities of us. They don't have to rely on the stereotypes. Okay, so that's my side note. So women, I think, are really well positioned to help us think deeply about equity and the proportional fairness part that takes into consideration what has uniquely and only happened to people of color is something that must be actively taught and built experiences around, so that the last part of the definition, we can all work to remedy what has happened. If you don't know what has happened, you think there's nothing to remedy. There's nothing to fix. The people of color just need to fix themselves. They need to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They need to stop making bad choices. And while some of that may be true, what that ideology ignores is the societal bubble in which Black and Brown lives have been foisted, and the narrower choices that many of us have had for hundreds of years that still linger and plague not just us, but at this point, the economy overall, henceforth. So I'm going to wrap up to say, because I'd love to get your comments and any questions that you might have. I spend a lot of time now really thinking about the unique positioning of women in our households, women in our community, to collectively focus on what must be true of our political heft, what must be true of the way that we parent, what must be true of the way that we give feedback to and help shape realities for our spouses. How do we think through different ways to introduce these concepts and the urgency of equity, even in our social media, in our community engagements, and most certainly as we are worshiping in our religious constructs. I am a Christian, and we have a number of clients for my company who are churches, and we work with them to really think about the advancement of equity biblically and how to think about that through the lens of God and his expectations of the community of people really looking like heaven. And that's important. So how do we really insist, not in a tangential way, but as a part of our daily lives, talking about equity, talking about the urgency of the economy, talking about the reality that we have to divorce ourselves from these concepts of sexism and racism, because at some point the entire country will fold because of it. So it's not just a social justice, it's not just right thing to do, it's just to ensure that as a society, we don't want to grow to a point where we are by 2045 majority minority and living inside of an apartheid state. Living inside of apartheid where the majority still has very episodic and infrequent experiences with and access to the fundamentals of how the economy works, how the politics in that country work, how the social structures in that country work, and even wealth building or economic mobility becomes stagnant because we can't access it because of all of the isms that are surrounding it. So let me pause there and just see if there are any questions or reactions or comments.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Lanier. It was very mindful thought about you. And as an educator, I'm teaching from past 15 years in elementary school. And my question is to you, like, there is a racism, of course, but how in school, do you have a program like which we can inculcate in the school, especially we see the bullying, it is a racism, also it is a reverse racism. Also, sometime as an adult, we see the racism as a teacher, as a brown person, they do have a doubt, even though you have all credibility, they have a doubt on you. Okay, are you like you are from that country, and how you can teach our kids English and here. So do you have a program like that which is inculcated in a school, especially in the elementary, which is work in the micro level, with a social emotional learning?
So the closest that I would have would be actually the book that I have is called Uncommon Ground, and it's guided I can see if I can find a link. It's guided activities really for parents or caregivers of children on how to really understand more deeply the value of people who are different from you. And it presumes and it recognizes that absent that understanding, you will be sucked into a society that believes that we actually don't have value. That is the default narrative. So it just presumes that that's where we are, and we try to get you out of that. And so I often do talks with homeschool groups or educator groups about ways to use and incorporate the workbook into their classroom settings, and how to think about, the exercise of these kinds of things, just things that you can introduce children to, and conversations that you can start with them, even with, you can use Berenstain Bears, or you can use other stories as an example to lift how are they noticing how difference is being experienced and navigated in these stories? What are the presumptions that we have about certain characters versus others? And what is that presumption based on? Asking questions like, how many of you have ever been inside of the home of another person, of a person of another race? How many of you have worshiped in another kind of setting? How many of you have maybe overheard family members speak in unkind ways about people who are different? And what does that say to you? So like, these are like questions that people oftentimes don't ask children, but it's so important because by the time they're 18, they would have either learned what you actively taught them about the value of Black and brown people, or society would have told them that they don't have value. And that's what they carry with them from 19 years up. And now they're in workplaces, as you know, and now, you know, we got to do all these trainings and all this stuff to try to deal with all these microaggressions and these presumptions about our inherent insignificance, people that just believe that we're inherently insignificant or inherently not intellectual. And so now that's cemented for them. So that's why I really want us to focus more on what happens before the children leave the home while they're still in learning mode about people of color. So that's a long way of saying I don't have a program per se, other than the book that I have and the the opportunities that I have to talk to educators about how to use it.
Yes, good. Could you please share the link?
Yeah, let me see if I can find it while we're on here.
Yes, and I like it is my heart to I goes to you when you said that we cannot grow until we have a particular not having a growth of socially where we are. We need all needs to be inclusive in our socially and politically and economically way to grow as a society, as a community.
That's right.
So I'll open the forum for anyone who have a question. Please raise your hand or unmute yourself and ask question to Dr. Lanier. I have Vivek Dada. Go ahead, unmute yourself and ask question.
Hello, Dr. Lanier. Thank you for the talk, and it's wonderful to hear you. And the topic that you chose pretty close to our community as well, you know. And I see you have touched upon the U.S. perspective of Black and brown. Okay, and also being we come from India, and also the geographical brownness.
Yeah.
I hope you are including in that context of when the discrimination happens in the United States. You know, we are looking through the one particular vein, and I see also the labeling. You know, the black means the weak and unintellect. Similarly, the notion also goes back home. Being I'm from India, also similar ways. The people who are untouchables means they're unintellect. And so that notion, when the borders are crossed and coming to United States, there's a lot of browns and the blacks, there's like a mixed cultural aspect to it right now, right? So I'm trying to understand, how do you remove that labeling in the US context, because of the international economical factors that we are in the United States, and there are a lot of immigrants from different nations. We also bring our baggages. Okay. Now we come from the unprivileged community, so-called in India, and there are also other Indians who are more privileged you might be interacting with. How do you remove that stereotyping in them, or do you understand the aspect of discrimination, the subtle form of discrimination which happens within the Indian, even the US context? I just wanted to understand, how do you react to that?
So I don't know that there's many among us who have not been taught that Black and brown, let me start over. I don't know that there's many among us who have not been taught that anything that's not white or elite isn't bad, right? Various degrees of deficient. And that would be true even in the Black community. You have Black people who really don't like other Black people, light skin, dark skin, rich, poor, people who live in the impoverished area, people who live in not impoverished area. same race, same culture. And so I think what I am struck by is how toxic and fairly undiscriminating discrimination is, right? To the point that we struggle within our own cultures to love each other and to see value in each other without assigning some sort of label. We're always trying to figure out, always trying to size you up, always trying to determine what category do I need to put you in so that I know how to assign value to you. And that is a human condition that I think is deplorable. But it is a part of our inheritance as human beings. I think that's true across the entire globe. I tend to, though, for purposes of my work, focus my behavior and belief reset is focused on Black Americans and Hispanic Hispanic Latino, primarily, not exclusively. And that is because, remember, I told you I work for the Federal Reserve. And when I look at the data that I know the Fed relies on and the census data that we all rely on, the growing majority that must be unshackled from the weight of the economic implications of racism are Black people and Hispanic people, because they will be moving into the majority. Now, what I teach, though, is a reimagining of human value, challenging the presumption that because I look like what I look like, I am to be put inside of a box and a label that is inherently deficient. That has to go. So that ideological reset benefits anyone who is sitting inside of a marginalized or discriminated against reality or construct. But my economic urgency argument is really rooted in who is becoming the majority in the United States. Now, globally, we have a lot of companies that are, of course, global and either now are moving to becoming more global in their operations and certainly more global in their recruiting and their employee base. And so that means that they have to really understand what is true of the global demographic shifts and the economic shifts. They have to pay attention to what's happening in countries, particularly in India and Africa, from a population standpoint, from a talent production standpoint, in order to realize that as we are growing in our global footing as employers, that must mean that we are bringing in talent, not just Black talent, not just Latinx, Latino talent, but talent from all over the globe who will have to insist on a very different employee-employer social contract and a very different reorientation of what work feels like. It is an untenable premise to ask Black and brown people in general, not just Black and Hispanic, all of us who are of color, to come into workplaces as the global majority and just deal with the racism du jour, or try to find ways to manage how to overcome all the stereotypes and all of the bias in the workplace, because that's a productivity eater. It eats our productivity. So we have to come to work to survive work and do our work. It's too much of a drain on the economy globally. So the benefactors, if you will, of the way that I teach and the way that I coach and the way that we support our clients is really anyone, including women, who find themselves in the other category. But my primary focus is really who's becoming majority here and who has to be released from the shackles of inequity quickly in order for the entire economy to just kind of raise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you for your answer, And also I wanted to ask you another point, I won't take much of, I think there's another hand raised. How do you emphasize, the education, which is a big parameter, it's one of the core thing, when you are talking about the economical development. If there's a lack of education among our underprivileged community, how would the ladder up, climb up to the level up and meet the economical development in their life?
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, it's tough. Economic mobility, that's how I talk about it, is critical for really anyone who's in a functioning society. You have to be able to earn money and spend money and save money commensurate with your preparedness, your interest, and your effort. That's just fundamental. You just have to be able to do that. we, for the most part, are so accustomed to the encumbrances that are around that, which are like bias and racism, sexism, and, you know, just all the self-hate, people who don't like us in our own community, like all these things come against those frameworks. And so sometimes I wonder if like us, our own mindset, our mindset is like one of the bigger challenges, and really understanding we kind of already have what we need to move into position, and we are supported by the global birth rates, right? That we just frankly are running out of white men. We just don't have enough to, in the foreseeable future, to run any society. I mean, that's true in the United States, it's true globally. We just don't. And so that means that how we think about our own economic mobility and the choices that we make with our money, the choices that we make with our families, how we teach our children about economic sustenance and stability, really also has to shift at the same time that we're moving into this global majority, this domestic majority. All of this kind of has to happen at once. So our mindset shift is as important as, you know, white and American mindset shift around all of these principles.
Yeah, thank you very much. Kalpana, back to you.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for that answer. We have a hand for Smita Ranke. Smita, go ahead. You can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hi, Nikki. Great
Hi.
to see you, and great to hear your talk, and the work that you are doing. It's very interesting to see that you are trying to bring in equity through economic factors. I was wondering, because you were into economics as well as I think you mentioned you were also into law.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a very interesting combination because for us, our mentor, Dr. Ambedkar, he did his PhD in anthropology. Then he did his PhD again from London School of Economics, and he was also a DLit in law. So I was wondering, and then he wrote the Constitution of India, and he's one of the biggest social reformers. So I was wondering if you had gotten a chance to look at his teachings, his writings. If yes, how has that influenced the movement to bringing in equality, equity, and justice amongst people who are right now minority but would become majority in US?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yes, I actually have had a chance to read a little bit about your mentor and his fabulous work and his uncompromising heart and positioning around this. What I think is important, and where there's synergy and similarity, is let's see, I'm trying to find a way to say this without seeming like I'm boasting. There's something about marrying your real lived experience with diverse academic credentialing. I think that gives you not just a better footing for credibility when you're speaking about these things, but I mean, so like your mentor, to be a person of color who is also insisting on and creating an environment and community around justice and equity and equality, it could feel to the recipient like, well, of course you want this. Of course you're whining and moaning, and because you're complaining, and because look at you, right? But when you bring in like the breadth of your professional experiences and the kindness, right? Just the disposition is not one of you better and you all are awful and this broad sweeping. I call it harm swapping. Like, because I feel harmed, I want you to now feel harmed in the name of teaching you how not to harm me. Huh? right? So, I mean, the people that do that, and I know that's not a part of your teaching, and I respect that deeply, because I think that's how you actually soften hearts, is through grace and through mercy, and really being deliberate about reaching and teaching and understanding the human condition and all of the implications associated with that. So I just appreciate that there seems to be such great synergy, not just by virtue of substantively, how what I talk about is very similar to this community's rooting around this work, but how it's delivered is so, so important. And that's really through the lens of a tempered and measured kind of emotional regulation and understanding of how and when to deploy certain emotional kind of realities, but really thinking about the emotions of the folks that you're working with, that you're dealing with as well. It's very tough to be both the patient and the doctor, and few understand how to do that well.
Got it, got it. And he just not just emancipated the most underprivileged within India, which again makes almost 250 to 300 million of the population, which is almost US population. But he also worked to emancipate the women of India, who had almost no rights in terms of inheritance, in terms of marriage, or in terms of lots of things. So, does that help you? Because you're also focused on women, does that help you to learn from him?
It does, because women also are moving into the majority. I haven't said that clearly, and I should have, but it's not just Black and brown, but women globally are becoming a part of the majority as well.
Right.
And so that, again, our emancipation and our being released from the burdens of someone else's narrative of us is economically consequential. Right. So not just a social right that would be great to have if somebody cared to give it to us, but there's some realities around how women have to be activated and unleashed into our full potency. Most definitely.
Great, and great to know your work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Anyone have question? Please raise your hand.
And I just want to just note, in the chat, I did find the link for that Uncommon Ground book if anyone's interested.
Yes, sure. Yeah. Yeah, we have a question from Professor Jagannath. Go ahead, sir. If you unmute yourself, you can ask question.
Thank you, Kalpana ji, and also Nikki. Madam, I am extremely happy to find your a wonderful combination of equity, law, and also women's, enabling. So my one simple question is, I'm a student of what the American conscience, be it from Sir Henry David Thoreau, who was, a guru for nonviolent direct action by Gandhi, and later on culminating into Earth Day movement in the 2000, and later on, before the 2000, I want to bring to your notice an important movement in America, that is the scientists and engineers for peace and development. I remember 10 to 15,000 scientists and engineers in America itself were mobilized by a movement headed by Helena Caldicott and Bill Caldicott of 19 late 80s. Probably you're aware of this. How scientists and engineers and the general public were against the nuclear option, and they were even ready to tie up themselves for the nuclear missiles, so that they wanted to bring conscience to the human, endeavor. My question is very simple. When we want to look at the racial and now strongly emerging the caste issue, I'm quite happy that you also be knowing that ANA, in its movement for the different states, how caste issues are also getting linked to the ethical, racial issues. And I want to ask a simple question to you. There seems to be some sort of a opportunity for the white also, who are having a little bit of conscience that the past racial discrimination and injustice caused. So something like a realization of the white, especially the intellectuals and also the people who are convinced that it is the community enabling which makes a difference, rather than the racial and other limited approaches. See, my question is: is it not advisable to have some sort of a sharing the common goal of enabling the community, irrespective of their racial or caste background? Because ultimately it's the conscience it matters, because awareness is not going to help, knowledge is not going to help, skill is also not going to help, only wisdom also is not going to help. Only conscience makes a difference. Conscience is the capacity to discern right and wrong. An individual, if is enabled, especially the younger generation is enabled to take a decision, it can make a well of a difference. There, Dr. Ambedkar becomes very relevant, which he says that everybody's, equality and everybody's well-being shall be the most deciding factor. So I remember in the United Nations headquarters when it was officially declared that Ambedkar understood that inequality challenges well-being. Inequality challenges well-being. That has been very well cited. So in simple terms, what I want to say, when people from the racial and the caste already affected and irreversibly damaged come out with a common cause, for all the human population, it makes a big difference. So I would like to take your comment, because you are so much enriched on converging law, converging equality, converging women empowerment, and in the large interest, the community enabling. Community enabling. I want to close by saying that I am of the opinion that the International Union for Conservation of Nature and UNEP and WWF in 1991 brought out a very wonderful document, Caring for Earth, Strategies for Sustainable Living, wherein they look beyond these, our background issues like that. So if you can throw some light on this, there seems to be a middle path which allows all background people who believe in human conscience. Because especially with this, I want to use the word counter space, because I'm a spaceman. I'm a scientist engineer, ISRO, worked for 30 years. And the counter space has already started doing much damage, the abuse of space technology. And the common public are nowhere near taking a decision on that. So that would be worthwhile to think, all of us, to look at what is the way out? What is the way out? Is it not living through rather than living in it? This is my very simple way of requesting you to throw some light on this. Living through shall be the essence of, the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing that. And I do agree with you so much. And I applaud your work. I wish I had, my gosh, the gray matter to understand anything around science and technology as deeply as you do. I guess let me just react really quickly. I think this idea of like having consensus around just the common decency, I think is core. It is core to how we ought operate, but it just always feels so elusive. And I think, honestly, it felt like an elusive, it's a wonderful concept upon which most of our countries have been founded, this idea that decency wins and the common good for the most, the utilitarian, the greatest good for the greatest number. While still recognizing that there will be inequality, there will be inequity in some respects, but as a matter of a societal default, that is kind of untenable. I know I sound like a little bit of a broken record, but I got to go back to the realities of the demographic shifting. And I think that really is where the power for all of this lies. I'm not sure that I would be able to make a living or even make a viable argument around the need to accelerate equity and the concern that I have around how Black and brown people are treated, absent the demographic realities. So I don't know, maybe it's just me being a little jaded. I don't know that as a common body of humans, we have enough fortitude to wrest a reimagined world in an argument that's focused on, the decency of us and really us all collectively deciding that we just want to be better and we should be decent. I don't know that we know how to mobilize around that well. I do think that if we make this an economic argument, we talk about the realities of birth rates, that's neutral. You can't politicize that. The birth rates are what they are. We don't have white children being born in the way that we do Black and brown children. That's true across the globe. It's true in the United States. We just don't. And certainly if they're born more, if they're white, they're born more female than male. We just don't have enough white males. And so that's how I tend to root the way that I'm thinking about this. And I think that could be a globally applied argument or premise or container upon which or in which we can rest our arguments around the urgency of equity, and in some cases, even the urgency of a better pursuit of equality.
No, thank you very much. That's quite a nice way of putting it so that it brings a lot of issues to be focused rather than our own experiences, because others' experience and also efforts to live through the difficulties is also important. Then only we will have our efforts being strengthened more and more. Thank you very much. It was very enlightening, and I call it as a best practice in social engineering. What you are doing. Many compliments and congratulations on that. I must thank Anna for a wonderful opportunity made so that some of us open up our mind and also see how wonderfully you are able to perform and show that this is possible. You see, that's very important. That's very important. Because ultimately, thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. That was a nice question. And I like the social engineering word from you.
That's great.
We have one more question from Meher. Go ahead, Meher Raj, sir. You can unmute yourself and ask question.
Hi there. Thank you, Dr. Lanier, for accepting the invitation for being online with us. I hope you remember me.
I do.
Yes, I'm good. Thank you so much. And from Anna team, we're glad. And I have a small question around your upcoming invite at Bay Area. I think we have some on 23rd of March. You have some empowering for women, some sort of seminar on that. Would you like to help us understand and how we can probably include some of our members there as well?
Oh, I'd love that. I'm going to put the link to that event in your chat. And if I don't know if you have a mailing list or community, if you would mind sharing this out, we'd love to have you. And it's primarily for women, but we do know that there's a couple of men that are going to come because they're just interested in hearing more about what we're doing. And so what I'll be doing in it's March 23rd. I'm hosting an event with this wonderful in this wonderful space called Area, and it is being donated to us for purposes of talking through how this exact topic, how to think about women, our power, our influence in an era of equity. And so I'll be doing a talk much like I did today, and then we have these three amazing panelists, two of whom will be local, one will be coming in from DC, to talk about their specific work as women, advancing this work, thinking about racial equity and gender-based equity and the urgency around that. And then we're going to have a community conversation. We are being hosted by Nikita Kandiria, and she is wonderful, just a wonderful young woman who in her own right is just doing some amazing work in the San Francisco area. I don't know, I think Nikita is maybe 23 and she owns a ton of businesses, bunch of restaurants. She's like super, super amazing. Also from India. And she and I met years ago and around some investments and things that she's been working on. And she's just been a follower and huge supporter of our work. So I'm just super, super excited to support her in this way and bring people into her beautiful, beautiful space. It's waterfront. It's right there in Sausalito, that's the name. It's Sausalito, California. It's right outside of San Francisco. And so we'll be hosting that conversation. It's from 5 to 8 p.m. on the 23rd. We are selling tickets, but they're only like $11. So we really want to pack the house. So it'd be great if you could help us get the word out on that.
Sure, appreciate that. And I mean, we did spoke about it before that the work Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar had helped the community in overall perspective, and I also shared some of the links for you to refer back to see if we can correlate his work. Another,
a ton of that.
yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, another question was like, I'm sorry to continue, but in here we've been in a very minority as such. We are small in numbers. How do you see that as a community, as a smaller community? How do you see that we can help the woman culture or the woman leaders to come up and participate more in the social reforms within the country?
Yeah, I don't know that the size of the community matters as much as the conviction of the community. So I just think it's a matter of just deciding that this is a priority that you would like to promulgate, that you want to learn more around, that you want to extend into in order to deploy your potency and to deploy your the impact of the voices that you have. Because one of the things that I learned, even with my Rare Woman Collective, we started 2 years ago. We had 30 women. Now we have 3,000. And so that small group beget a larger group that beget a larger group. It just swells. And it wasn't necessarily because we were doing a lot on social media, whatever. It's because these women of 30 were like deciding that the conversations that they were going to be having henceforth would be focused on, in some way, how to introduce a new way of thinking and a new way of believing around race and to a certain extent gender. And so they would have dinner. They would go out to dinner with their friends and they would inject that in the conversation in ways they hadn't before. They would go to their family reunions and they're talking about this more. They're posting about these kinds of things more. They're coming back to their home base and saying, okay, who got yelled at today? What are the tactics on, trying to talk about this stuff? And so we have resources for these women as they're growing. And I think the same could be true for you. I mean, you have cultivated this beautiful community. You come together, I think, every Sunday to sharpen each other and to commune with one another. And there's great potency in that. So I'm not worried at all about the size of the community here or the community, the Indian community in general in the United States. But it really does boil down to, do you want to decide that as a culture, as a community, that this must be a part of the language that we're going to be incorporating into the way we live our lives now and the conversations that we're going to have.
Got it. Thank you so much. Understood.
Of course.
All right. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lanier. I don't see any question. Anyone has any question? But it is very nice session with you, Dr. Lanier. And yes, we will definitely share with our group and community over in SFO about your event and how you would like to Anna to collaborate with you.
Let's see. Maybe just helping to share the word about what we're doing. Just kind of, I don't know if many of you are on or care a lot about the social media, because these days it can get a little depressing. But I do quite a bit of posting on LinkedIn and Instagram, to a certain extent Facebook, but not much. But I do a lot of my talks and musings and theories, and a lot of our offerings and our upcoming events are primarily on LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn, I would encourage you to reach out. Let me see if I can just get my link up there really quickly and just have that easy to find. Helping to share these kinds of events that we're talking about in March is wonderful. I'd love to stay in contact with you. Probably LinkedIn is a great way to do that. I'll also put my email address. Okay, here's, I think this is my profile. Yep. And then here's my email address. If you have, events, I'm always looking for speaking engagements with organizations, with companies. I'd love to be considered for any of those to kind of help employers really think differently about this. If you're a part of any women's groups or women's organizations that or conferences that bring in speakers, I would love for that consideration as well.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And it was very mindful conversation, and we'll definitely look forward more work with you in future. And I'll conclude this session. Thank you so much, and happy International Women's Day.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate
you.
the opportunity.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. I conclude this session.